Hello and good morning. Welcome to the Going Executive Director Show. My name is Brandy and this is Jeff. Our purpose is to give you the skills, techniques, inspiration, motivation, and daily activities needed for you to build a solid, profitable business. And over this past week, we've been going over John Maxwell's 21 indispensable qualities of a leader, and we are on quality number 9, which is generosity. How are you able to add generosity to your leadership? Your candle loses nothing when it lights up another. And I got my notes here so I could keep myself on track, and I got a quote for you today. Calvin Coolidge quoted, "No person was ever honored for what he received, but honor has been the reward for what he gave." So nothing speaks more loudly than generosity. It's not something that you do occasionally, and it comes from the heart and touches every aspect of your life. Effective leaders don't gather things for themselves, they gather things for others. So as an example of this, actually, when we first met, I thought he was the coolest person in the world. This was before we were dating, and I ended up going to my first convention, and it wasn't planned out very well. The group that I went with didn't quite have everything planned like they said they were going to plan it. So Jeff actually had to save my butt a couple of times when I went to here. I was hours away from home. He ended up helping me with a pop tire. He was on the phone with me at 3 a.m. with the pop tire on the side of the road in the middle of the desert. And he always reached out to me to help me with things, and that meant a lot to me, and that's what originally attracted me to him from the beginning. So I'm not going to go any more into that, but also, what are things that are you going out of your way to be generous to your team and your friends? Are you reaching out to them? Like, how can you help them? And sometimes it's just listening to somebody. Sometimes late at night, we might see somebody might put something on Facebook. It might look a little off, like somebody's down. Just reaching out to a person, being like, "Hey, I saw your post. What's going on? Do you need somebody to talk to? How can I help?" Sometimes just reaching out and talking to somebody means more than giving anything. And there's different types of generosity. So with that, I'm going to have Jeff take over on how you can develop the quality of generosity in your life.
So I think the first thing about generosity is, John talks about is being grateful for whatever you have. So sometimes you just need to make a list for people. Some people don't understand how, grateful they are. And I'll be honest, I was one of those people that was pretty out there when it came to, being grateful for stuff, simply because when you grew up in the United States and, I grew up middle class, we didn't have everything, but we had everything, compared to the rest of the world. And it wasn't really until I left and went to South America and kind of ran around down there. And I say ran around, I got married, and I went to South America. That's where my ex is from. And in Brazil, we traveled from one side of the country to the other. And we went through a lot of small towns. And when I started seeing the kids that would basically dig holes in the road and then be throwing dirt on it as the cars went by, and then they would ask for money, it gave you a different perspective. We'd stop in some small towns and, walk around, and the little kids would come up to you that obviously were living in the street. I mean, it just gave you a totally different perspective. When I ended up coming back to the United States and I watched people complain about stuff, I found myself, I started getting angrier and angrier because I started understanding how much stuff I had growing up. So sometimes it's really good to take yourself out of, the norm. The average person in Indiana doesn't actually leave 50 miles outside of their house. And that's true for a lot of places. I think I just read, it's somewhere in New York that some people haven't left, the 10 square mile that they grew up in ever. Ever. They don't go anywhere. So their perspective is very skewed on what the rest of the world's like. And it's really hard to have, to be grateful for something if you have everything and you're kind of in it all the time. Eddie Woolard's watching. What's up, man? So being grateful is number one. Number two, put people first. This is a tough one in a lot of cases because it actually asks you not to be a selfish asshole like most people are. Most people are just about them. They start out with me, 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 me. And now that I'm done talking about me, look at me, call me, do this for me. I want this for me. And it's just the way it is. We're actually built as human beings. If you kind of know anything about psychology, our basic human instinct is set up to basically keep us safe. So therefore, all of everything that we think about, do, and basically consider is always self-preservation, keeping ourselves safe, keeping ourselves, where we want it. And, of course, babies grow up like that, but we meet a lot of adults that are still like that. I met 30, 40, 50-year-olds, and, the conversation is me, 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 and you're not going to believe this about me. Meanwhile, you got people and death and destruction all around them that they're creating because of this attitude of not focusing on other people first. Obviously you got to take care of yourself. Don't get me wrong. Take care of yourself. You feed yourself, do what you're supposed to do. But the constant victim mentality is out there for sure. Number three, don't allow the desires of possessions to control you. I like what Grant Cardone says. He's like, the broker you are, the more money means to you. The broker you are, typically the more money means to you. And it's true, when I had less money, I would almost get pissed off that stuff would break, or that, somebody would come up and be like, oh my God, the vacuum cleaner broke. And I would be kind of upset with them. Why didn't you take care of it? I don't know if you've ever had a family member. Why didn't you take care of stuff nicer? Well, it was a piece of shit to begin with. It was a $40 vacuum cleaner. It wasn't supposed to last forever. But $40 meant a lot to me. The more money I made, when something broke, I was like, we'll just get a new one. It wasn't a big deal. I didn't point at the person necessarily and get upset. Number four, it says regard money as a resource. It's only a resource, not necessarily the end-all be-all of everything. And once you learn how to make money, especially inside of direct sales, once you learn how to make money and you can generate it, money is nothing more than an exchange. So, you're basically looking to exchange a good or service or labor for, a dollar. The key is most people are just exchanging it for the lowest amount instead of a higher amount because they lack a skill. So that's the key, is how do you do that? How do you figure that out? How do you exchange for more money? Kind of a cool trick. We'll talk about that later. Number five, it says develop a habit of giving. How do you get the habit of giving? It starts out small, I think helping people is first off. So many times I'm sitting in a restaurant and, I know people are posting this all the time on Facebook and social media where you'll see, 3 or 4 older people standing and there's all the teenagers sitting like this down looking at their phone, and they're on a train or they're at a restaurant or whatever, and it's just people have lost perspective of what's around them completely, completely ignoring the fact that probably the pregnant lady would probably like a seat more than the 17, 18-year-old that's sitting, looking at their phone. It's just people just don't recognize stuff anymore because social media and things like that are taking over. So, look up and around. If you're watching this show, is there somebody who can help? So how do you develop that habit of giving? You can start early. Some people start in church. If that's the way you start, great. That's one way to start. Certain people, friends of mine, some of them started in church. Some of them went and did things. They would do whether it be missions or soup kitchens or, some kind of project where you're giving back and just helping out. I love the teenagers that got pissed off at all the trash on the beach, and there were a couple teenagers, and I can't remember the exact location, if that was the United States or not, but they got pissed off. Actually, I know one of them specifically was in India. They got mad that the beach was just a mess, so they went, just a group of teenagers, and they were like, okay, we're going to clean stuff up. This is ridiculous. And they just started cleaning stuff up, and now the wildlife's come back. So people do it for different reasons. Francis is with us. Hello. So I don't care what your reason is, but giving back is huge. Giving your time is huge. Helping people is huge. And Brandy made a good point. You do see a lot of people. We happen to be up late a lot because part of our business is out on the West Coast. And I'm consistently talking to people in California. I have for years. I built a business years ago where the base was in California. So 80% of, it seemed like the conversations I was having came out of the West Coast, and obviously their 3-hour time difference. So I started living on that time because I flew out there about every 2 months. And it worked out great. I liked what we were doing. It was a lot of fun. And I just kept that time. But now, because we're up at 12, 1, 2, 3 in the morning, when people are having problems, it seems like they'll post stuff online. So I've reached out to a ton of people, and it's amazing, everything from PTSD to, just silliness, in some cases, massive abuse in some cases, both of substance and other things, and just being able to help people out, to be able to give back. I sat on the phone one time for, I want to say it was 2.5, 3 hours. A good friend, his nephew, had basically overdosed. And there's people out there who need help, people, like real help. And the next day he wrote me, because his parents had come, and he was the one who found him. Which was, obviously even worse, traumatic. And he wrote me and he's like, I really appreciate that you were, A, up, and B, total stranger. Like we had met in passing one time, and he's like, you were the only person that was up and would talk to me, after this event. That kind of giving back, I didn't want anything for it. I didn't ask for anything for it, but, just to be there for somebody else is huge. It's huge, a friend of mine, Bess, we mentioned about, she lost a pet, and, similar, a pet is part of your family, especially for some people, it is their family, on a day-to-day basis. So just being able to be on the phone and talk with people, and, that by itself can be giving, it doesn't always have to be a financial, but sometimes it's time, and your time is actually, more important in a lot of cases because you can't get it back. So reflecting on it, are you a generous leader? It says things to improve your generosity. Number one, giving something away. So, I get asked a lot. They're like, why do you do all these shows? You're always online. Every time I turn this on, it's you guys. And it is. It's just giving back. It is a way of advertising, correct. But it also is generosity of just giving back and helping people out and, kind of connecting the dots. So inside the company that we work with, of Legal Shield, it's a way of giving back to the community, back to the people who are, both involved and the people who aren't involved. I get asked all the time, hey, what's this company that you're doing? And, yeah, it's advertising, but it's really to give back. There's so many people who are in other organizations who reach out and say, hey, can you help me? Put your money to work. It says, if you know someone with a vision to really do something great, it's basically being able to help them launch. And I think Shark Tank is a great example of that. There's so many people that have great ideas. There's so many people who, might have the idea up front, but they don't know exactly how to implement it. Sometimes it takes money, sometimes it takes time, sometimes it's connections. I connect a lot of people. The last thing, it says find someone to mentor. But I think more important than finding somebody to mentor is, find someone to mentor you first. I was very lucky that I was able to find a couple people inside of direct sales and network marketing that I was able to learn from. And what I did is I found a very successful person and basically connected to them, and they were not part of my team. They were not part of my upline in a lot of cases. And I basically built a relationship with them, which took about 10 years to figure out how to do, by the way, because I was not good at building relationships. And I certainly wasn't building good at building relationships with people who, were financially successful, because I didn't understand. I was like, what the hell can I give this person in return for them helping me? What can I contribute on any level? And it took reading a bunch of books, and it took listening to a bunch of programs, to the point where I finally was able to figure out how to connect with people who were really successful in their fields. And now I have the ability to do it. It's actually quite easy to do now, because I figured out the things to do. And part of it is just, it's not about what you want from them, because most people who are successful, most of the people coming at them want something from them. They want money. They want their time. They want to talk to them. They want to waste time, complaining and criticizing and bullshitting about, stuff that really isn't helping anybody. And the one thing that I've seen from successful people is they guard their time. They guard their time. They guard who they're around. There's a reason why there's a gate and a fence and a wall around a super successful neighborhood. It's to keep certain people out. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It also keeps your sanity. There's a reason why caller ID was invented. It's to keep certain people, telemarketers mainly, but also people who just want to suck the life out of you, both, financially, emotionally, and time-wise. But how do you give back? How do you build that relationship with those people? Well, there's a couple good books out there that I would suggest. Gina's with us. Hello. A couple good books if you really want to connect with super successful people. How are we on time?
We have 10 minutes.
Okay. So if you want to connect with a bunch of people, here's a couple books. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Actually, anything by Dale Carnegie. How to Have Power and Confidence in Dealing with People by Les Giblin is actually, I think, even better than How to Win Friends and Influence People, although it's similar. It talks about being able to make eye contact, being able to ask questions, and being interested in the other person. Really, it was a line of questioning that I learned, and then I found how to give back. Always look for ways to contribute back or help that person, whether it's a connection. That's huge. If you find out somebody's super successful in a business and you can connect them with who they want to be connected to, that by itself will usually get you in the door. I was told by John Maxwell, let's look at what he did when he wanted to be successful in church, of all things. That's where he started out. He was like, okay, I want to be successful. I want to know how these guys around the country are so successful. He actually picked up the phone and called the pastors of these super successful churches and says, hey, I live in a hick town in Indiana, and I'm in this, in this small town with this small church, and I want to learn how to grow this huge church. I want to know what to do. And he started basically paying pastors. He's like, I'll donate this amount of money if you'll sit down with me for an hour and talk about how you're doing what you're doing. And he sat and interviewed. So he actually talks about this, that every summer, every spring, the family vacations were basically centered around him going to whatever location this was. And this was before the internet, and this was before social media, and this was before, the connectivity that we have now. He didn't have the ability just to connect with somebody online. He drove across the country. He would meet them. He would pay for their lunch. He would get out a notebook with all of his questions, and he would just ask questions, and he would start learning from all these different people. And he did it for years. For years, that's how he gathered the information. Being interested in the person. So I think sometimes it's as simple as buying somebody lunch, buying somebody a cup of coffee, and saying, hey, I had some questions about the profession you're in. I had some questions about why are things working for you. Jim Rohn teaches this. He says, if you met somebody that has an amazing relationship with their significant other, wouldn't it make sense to interview that person and find out what they're doing? If you meet somebody who has amazing kids and their kids are succeeding and their kids listen, not all the time, because no kids listen all the time, but their kids listen and their kids seem to be going the right way. He goes, wouldn't it make sense to sit down and interview that person, say, what are you doing? What are you reading? What are you teaching here? Why is this working for you and it's not working for me? Now, what we do is we sit at home and we complain and we post shit on Facebook about why my life isn't working, but we don't go asking. I mean, God forbid we ask somebody who's successful how they're doing it. That's
the key. Asking somebody who's successful. Don't be asking people that don't have what you want, because then you're just going to get bad advice.
And most of us, that's who we get our advice from. Somebody who has just as horrible kids as we do, or lives as we, hey, I'm broke, you're broke, let's talk about it. Oh, that person's going to help you, get out of your situation. And it took a while before I realized I had to get around people who I was uncomfortable to be around. I was uncomfortable even to sit with, because my self-confidence and my self-conscious was so low. I mean, a friend, maybe I heard that at a seminar. He's like, your self-conscious is bad when you feel like you can get into their house without opening the door. You just slide underneath the door because your self-esteem is so low. I mean, that's kind of where I was in most cases. And even when I left, my self-esteem still wasn't good enough to get out the door with opening it. I could probably slide out or, fit through the keyhole. That was just kind of where I was at. Eventually, it took years before I started becoming okay with certain things, where I could sit with these successful people and I didn't feel so self-conscious that I almost couldn't hear what they were saying. I went to events, I went to seminars, and I forced myself to get around them, part of which I sat up front. Whether I went to a church or whether I went to, a friend's house, or whether I went to a game of some kind, whether it be football, baseball, whatever, I felt self-conscious if I was up front. I always wanted to sit in the back, just like sit in the back of the classroom. When I went to a seminar, when I went to a business meeting, when I went to the Chamber of Commerce, I forced myself to sit up front. Why? The view from the front and the people at the front are different than the people at the back. The people at the front have basically usually spent time and built relationships and know the organization. So I had to force myself to go do that. Because of that, that put me around people who built organizations rather than watching somebody else build an organization, talking about business. So these are some of the books, that I would read, How to Win Friends and Influence People, How to Have Power and Confidence in Dealing with People. Other books about, learning about personalities. Florence Littauer, Personality Plus. Jim Rohn is another. Anything by Jim Rohn will teach you a lot about a person and, what you have, what you don't. He talks about giving a lot in the beginning, but getting around successful people across the board. If you look at almost any successful leader, that's the one thing they'll talk about. Dan Pena talks about, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Jim Rohn says, your income and your lifestyle is basically going to be dictated by the 5 people you spend the most time with. So be careful who people are like, why does my life suck? Look at the 5 friends you hang out with and what are their lives like? Well, they have the same problems I do. Congratulations, you've figured it out. Now, what you have to do is go figure out how to get around people who don't have any of that. And sometimes it's changing professions, and sometimes it's changing where you hang out, and sometimes it's turning off the TV, to be able to make that time available to go out and do things. But get around successful people. When I wanted to learn how to build a business, I had to get around people who are building a business. The business that I wanted to be in, nothing. I still go back to Power and Confidence because it's good. Yeah, it's a great book. It took a while. 10 years to get around these people to figure it out. Michael Hankins, they just bought a really cool truck over the weekend. So this is some of the stuff I had to do. Other books, every book hits you differently. Gary Vaynerchuk, I consistently listen to Gary Vaynerchuk because he talks about awareness of who you are and what you're doing, and the idea, I think Dave Peters has mentioned this several times, about give. Kenesha's with us, hello. You want to give consistently. He talks about the jab, but basically I'll sit down, I'll meet somebody, and I'll just figure out how I can connect them, how I can help them. Sometimes without even asking for anything, sometimes without even wanting anything back from them, just to be able to give and connect. Why is that important? If you get good at just giving, I was taught this early on, if you get good at just giving away the opportunity that you're in, for instance, for those of you who are involved in business with us in Legal Shield, just giving the opportunity away. Look, I'm not looking for anything. I don't need you to join. I don't need you to buy a thing. I just want you to know what we're doing. So if you do run into somebody, you can refer us. Just by giving it away. That's how it started coming back. When I didn't necessarily request something in return for the time. I didn't need them to join. I didn't need them to buy. I wanted them to, but I was like, I don't care if you do this or not. I know that the law of numbers are going to work out for me. I know that putting this out there enough, people are going to run into somebody who needs it, and they're just going to call. And eventually I started getting calls. It took a while. It took my belief rising high enough, but it took a while. But eventually people just started calling me and be like, hey, I need that thing that you're, offering, or, inside of our massage holistic business, same thing, inside of health and wellness coaching, it took a while, and then all of a sudden I started getting those calls, hey, my significant other, or hey, I'm dealing with this issue, we get asked that a lot on Facebook, hey, I'm dealing with this issue, family members have started reaching out, hey, I've got this going on, can you help, what would you suggest, and just being able to help out, with nothing in return.
And for those of you who don't know that, know us, if you're wondering why he said that, Jeff and I are both naturopathic doctors in our studio. So if you're wondering why people are asking it, that's why. Just to clarify.
Right, reaching out at midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 in the morning. That's what they're reaching out for. So that's just a little bit about generosity and why it's important. Some of the books that you can connect with. The more you know about people and psychology, the better. David Bird, one of my mentors, and one of the only people that I've listened to as a coach and or business person that's physically helped a lot of things that I do, because he was successful, my thing is look at the person who's coaching, and if they're not more successful and they do not have what you want, don't listen to them. I mean, that's as simple as it is. You know, I've learned that years and years and years ago. That was one of the first things that they drilled into us. Way too many people are listening to the wrong people and getting their advice from people that do not have what they want. Therefore, they are not coaching you in the direction of what you want. They're coaching you in what they think will work, not what does work in a lot of cases. And I've so many times run across people who have gotten advice on just bad advice. Great intentions, love, you know, commitment, all that, but the wrong advice. Why? Because they're not actually physically doing it. They're just talking about doing it. So with that, that's a wrap for today. I appreciate everybody for jumping on. Tiffany's here. A bunch of people jumped on here at the last minute. Kanisha, how are you? Johnette, Dave. Appreciate everybody. We're going to jump off here. Thanks for watching. And we're going to jump over to the other show, the MLM Lunchtime Leadership Show. Thanks so much.